We're live. Welcome to ReinerStop TV.
We are live. This is so great. And I see the dogs in the back, Chelsea. They came on right at the perfect time. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Jody Bryan. I am founder, partner here with Chelsea Sutton at ReinerStop, and welcome to this week's episode of ReinerStop TV. We are so excited to have you guys here today, not only for this topic, but because of the company that we have. So I am thrilled to actually also, let everybody know, if you haven't already, our ReinerStop Showtime that covered the Congress Futurity finals is still available for purchase. We heard from you guys. I mean, Chelsea, we got so many messages, people that are like, hey, I heard about this from a friend, or hey, I saw this, or I saw that post. Could I still have it? And that's something that we did different this year, is that all live ticket holders had extended viewing. And we actually, because we got so many messages from everybody, we extended it one more week. So you can still run over to ReinerStop.com, grab your ticket, watch the Showtime on demand as much as you want. You can see all of the cool technology that we incorporated this time to really help bring everybody together to get involved in reining and have some fun. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chelsea, and let's welcome in our guests and our topic for today.
Thank you. So great to be here. Nice to be not on the microphone for a few minutes and back on the live stream with you guys. If you guys are joining us live, I see quite a few hopping on with us. Let us know in the comments where you are joining from. We would love to say hello to you and know what part of the world you're visiting us from, albeit digitally, because we're so glad to have you guys. In addition to our digital streamers, I'm really excited to have Brian and Jody with us. Jody Brainard and Brian Dygert are both with us on Showtime. So those of you guys that have joined one of our 3 streams this year have already gotten to know them as experts there. But we wanted to bring them back today because of their expertise as industry veterans, as judging experts, as judges, monitors, and of course, as horsemen. So I'll give you a quick bio on each of them, and I want to dive right in because we have some really great topics to talk about today. Brian Dygert happens to also be my father, honored to grow up underneath him, started as a horse trainer himself, developed a career on the production side of the world, tenured judge, got his judge's card back in 1985 when the judges program evolved to be what it is today. Was an NRHA president back in 2002 and has been serving as a judge and judges monitor for many years, now joining us on ReinerStop. He is also a facilities manager at Westworld of Scottsdale, a premier venue for horse competition across the world, really. You guys have had some cool stuff in the past few years as well. Jody Brainard, happy to have you with us. Also a tenured judge, horseman coming from a line of other horsemen and trainers, who also brings not only a judge's perspective, but a trainer's perspective, trains non-pros and has high-level competitors in the barn with him, and brings a really great and unique perspective from both the judges side, has been a judges teacher and judges monitor for many years, but also from the trainer and rider perspective as well. Today, we want to dive in and talk about both a little bit of a Congress recap, as well as looking back at what our competition this year has shown us thus far, right? What has competition shown us? What has our judges score shown us? And what does that say about the current state of reining? We are in futurity season, leading into the NRHA Futurity coming here in just 6 weeks. I think I looked at the calendar this morning and we're exactly 6 weeks out. It's going to come in a blink. And so it's going to be a fun time to tap into our experts who have been with us through Showtime analysis on this year's competition and hear what they have to say from that expertise perspective of competition. Without further ado, let's dive right in. In general, you guys, let's just look at kind of a highlight of the past year of competition, major events and futurities. And maybe let's start by taking a retroactive look at, you guys have been around since really before the judges system was the judges system in 1985, but certainly seeing it from that time where we're judging reining as we are today to its evolution now. Talk to us about some of those differences. What was competition back then? What have we seen this year?
Who do you want to start?
Let's start with you.
it when you talk about the simple piece of competition, the interesting piece is the depth. The first obvious reflex to me is it's deeper. The scores are the quality of competition would be relatively similar, but back in Jody and my time, when you talk about the 70s, 80s, and 90s, you'd see 1, 2, or 3 horses that would mark 222 and better. We're now seeing 15 to 20 horses per finals that can mark that. So the depth of the competition is definitely the first reflex. And then the second piece to that would be the venues and the events itself. Back in our day, the tractor and the drag used to live in the corner of the arena while we showed in it. So those days are gone. They're behind us, which is a good thing. But when you talk about quality of ground, quality of events, quality of venues, quality of management, as well as the amount of them, back in our day, you had one. It was called the Futurity. The Futurity was at the Congress. That was it. There's now 20 of those. Mm-hmm. So to me, that's the evolution over 35 years.
Jody, what do you think?
Yeah, I would have to agree. I just got done judging the high roller at Vegas and got a chance to do the Futurity and some of the Derby events there. And I shake my head because I often say that, back in Brian and I's day when we started this thing, there were probably 3 or 4 guys that were capable of winning the Futurity, but then also because they had the best horses. Now, I think there's 100 kids that can, I say kids and some older guys too, but that can win this event but it just depends on the car they're driving. It's the horsepower, but judging that high roller, just horse after horse after horse that came in the pen. And it's like, it's mind boggling to see the quality and how good these guys are and how good the horses are and how fat and how slick and how healthy. Genetics has done an incredible job in the last 30 years. It's changed the event.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I know I wasn't able to stay. I was at High Roller, but I had to leave before all the aged events, but watching them at home, of course. And I mean, those horses, I mean, I feel like throughout this year, I mean, we had the opportunity at ReinerStop Showtime, we saw NARS, then we saw the Tulsa Reining Classic, and then we saw the Congress. I mean, 3 very different arenas, different parts of the country, and the competition didn't change. The depth of the competition, the quality of the horses, the riders, I mean, it was there. As far as, seeing that depth of competition, how does that, as, with your judge's hat on, how does that make your job even more complex, I guess, let's say?
Well, I think, and Brian, I can start, and I won't go too far off topic, but something that was
Jody, if you
something that was of interest to me. One of the earlier judges schools that I went to was in Nashville, and John Snowman was doing the instructing right there, and so assisting him was Clark Bradley and Dick Pieper. And at that time, I mean, this system was just new, right? I mean, it was brand spanking new, and John was doing a great job. And he was doing his dead level best to teach this. And he was adamant when he was teaching us and talking to everyone that, okay, this is either a 0, or it is a +1/2, or it is a +1, or it is a 1.5. But, he was trying to get away from that in between, the same issues that we have developed now with the better horses. But anyway, so he plays the first video and he has Dick and Clark mark the run. And John had just given us this big 10-minute spiel about it is either this or it is this. It's definite. And John and Clark were going, well, I think that's maybe a +1/2, or it could be a 0, but I lean more towards, but they didn't make any decision whatsoever. And poor John, he just slapped his forehead because his 2 best guys in the whole room couldn't decide between themselves what that maneuver evaluation was supposed to be. It was relatively simple back then compared to what the horses are doing now. Mm-hmm. It is so difficult to separate horses at the high end. The low end horses are relatively easy. They take care of themselves. But the high end horses, that level that, the Derby aged event horses, say from 4 to 7 years old right now. I mean, and they're so well schooled and there's so much money spent. Every one of those horses can do a +1/2. 75% of them can do +1 maneuvers. With the system that we currently have, they're very, very difficult to separate. So, Brian?
Yeah, no, well, when you say the difficulty of in the question, Shelley, I fully agree with what Jody just said. The difficulty is in the fact that in the high-end competition, our system will not allow us to make fine distinctions. That's point one. So they can be made, but the distinctive difference on quality is where our system is weak. That's point one. Point two, we have too much pressure from the industry for our judges to be marking the same as opposed to judging uniquely individual. And that puts an innate function in a judge, because if I think that a given maneuver is excellent, I'm supposed to give it a 1.5, and I should every time I think that. I should not have any other thought. My concern with then being viewed, if I'm the only one that does a 1.5 and my cohorts do it a 0.5 and a 1, and the industry does whatever it thinks it does at the end gate, that pressure gets to be significant. And I would tell you it's a problem, because what we should be doing is motivating those officials to do their best work every time. And we want it at the top end in the fine distinctions, and we struggle there. So that's the answer in my view.
Yeah. Jody. Go ahead, Chelsea.
No, I was just going to say that I think that insight is keen, because for me as an announcer, I often hear the gate chatter. That's what I call it, the gate chatter, right? The people standing at the gate who are watching whomever is riding, talking about whatever it is that they were talking about at the barn that's just made its way to the gate. And the score spreads, or the scores not being the same, is 50% at least of the conversation that I hear being had at the back gate. And I had not really thought about that. I thought about that being maybe a misconception, but I hadn't thought about that creating pressure on the judges and on the judges program at large that could be weakening its ability to make, the way you say, fine distinctions.
Well, correct, but there's two parts to that. Human nature is a big one, and the point's this. What we want is perfection, and we know that perfection doesn't exist. As a judge in the sport of reining, all I have to find is excellence. And when I see excellence, I should be compelled to mark it a 1.5. Our industry, everything about our industry keeps me from doing that. I can talk myself out of the 1.5 and make it a very good 1 piece of cake. And that is much safer. And that's not my best work. My best work is supposed to be happening to what that exhibitor is showing me, and I'm supposed to do that every time. So I just say that in a relative form of what that is. We've got to teach ourselves as an industry. The reason we have multiple judges is because we want individual scores that are put together for one end result. We have this very false hope that a multiple judge system is supposed to have the same scores across the board. It's actually false.
Yeah. Jody, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I totally agree with that. And sometimes the tools that we're giving our judges today are, and like Ryan and I had discussed this at length, and even with you girls, the tools that we have in the box aren't enough to make the distinctions. And I was talking about this with my wife and a friend of hers today, and perhaps this example will help a little bit. There was, in the $1 Million Reining, there was a horse that had very good to excellent approaches to the stop. I wasn't at the $1 Million Reining, Shelley, you may have been, I don't know, but I'm under the understanding that the ground perhaps wasn't as good as it could have been. So whether that had a bearing on the way that the horse was stopped or not, I can't say that because I didn't see it. But yeah. My understanding, because this subject came up, and Brian, you can help with this too. There's one horse with an exhibitor that has excellent approaches. I mean, totally willingly guided, ran as instructed. Stops were not good. In other words, the horse was proppy in front, did not hold the ground, but the approach was absolute, perfect.
Yeah.
We have another horse that rounds the corner, total disregard to the rider, throws his head up and takes off and runs off in the approach, but hits the ground, slides like crazy, and is soft in front. So who is better in that case per maneuver? They do it on 3 maneuvers. How do we separate those two? Some component has to have more credit, either the approach and or the stop, or do they carry equal weight? Or does it all just come back to the rollback and or the backup then? And this was for a $500,000 first prize. So you know what? We need to be able to separate that, and we need to be able to teach to separate that. We need to be able to have the tools to separate that, because both those horses were online to make a great deal of money. And I think one of them probably did.
Well, and think about everything, Jody, that you just shared, like going on in your mind. And,
sure.
And you're a judge sitting there, right, watching this happen. And and oh my goodness, sorry about that.
Somebody's really excited to talk about the topic, right?
Sitting there, and I cannot believe this is happening right now. And you're going through all of that in your head. You're trying to make all that decision while you're watching that maneuver, and then you have to be ready at that rollback because now that's the start of the next maneuver.
For sure.
So I think that puts our judges in a very peculiar position to be able to try and process all of that while moving on already to the next maneuver. You don't have time.
Correct.
And
go ahead.
I said, you know, and Brian, I want you to help me with this too, but what we do is we leave, and we should have, as a judge, we should have a certain amount of opinion allowed to us. I mean, it's within my rights as a horseman to like something better, one type horse better than another. I should have that option. But what we do is in those big reignings that bothers our judges, we leave that up to that individual without that prior instruction. We don't say, here's what we need to do, or here's what we would advise you to do, or here's how you would separate that. We just say, here, take your best guess at it, or not guess, but what do you think is the best? And you're going to have 3 or 4 different opinions as to that approach and that stop. And all of a sudden, here come the spreads. It's supposed to happen that way. Brian?
Yes, no, I 100% agree. The answering 2 parts to what you're talking about. The industry should be helping us to define the portions in any given maneuver that are certainly more important and therefore more weighted than other parts of that maneuver. But the second piece that's most important is we don't have enough tools. The tweeners, all of the maneuvers catch too much. The top and bottom of any given maneuver are distinctly different, but mathematically they come out the same, and there lies the weakness.
Yeah. And now let's actually just for a moment, because we have talked about this, you guys, and if you haven't, if you guys, I mean, not to put a plug in, but I'm going to, for our showtime. I mean, you guys, we actually discussed this, 2 different perspectives, 2 different judges, both these gentlemen right here. During showtime, we're able to like slow-mo, reverse, we're able to see all the different pieces of it. And you can see even the complexities of the decisions between these 2 gentlemen right here when they're judging, looking at the same maneuver in the same run. So I highly, if you guys want to really dive deep into the judges' side and the mind, Showtime's where it's at. It's only available a few more days. I'm telling you guys there. But I want to jump into that spread scores a little bit. We just kind of dabbed on it. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important because as a competitor myself, Jody, we just talked about this just a few minutes ago, but it's like, I look at the scores and, before I had all this education that I had now, I'd look up and I'd be like, well, that judge doesn't know what he's talking about, or that one missed it, or that one didn't like me for some reason, or what have you. And, oh, that judge that gave me the best score is, that's the right one, kind of like, let's dive into like spread scores. Cause I think this is an industry-wide thing, not just a non-pro thing. No. I think this is an industry-wide professional, non-professional enthusiast understanding that curve there, why it happens.
I'm going to jump in first and then I'll let Jody take it from there. I'm going to give you 2 simple numbers based on the events that we've done through ReinerStop so far. So out of 200 horses in finals, you're talking about 2%, which is 4 runs that have what I call bingo score, which is no spreads. 4 runs out of 200, okay? 60% of reining in the last 200 finalists that we've watched over the last 6 months will be within a 2-point spread. So those numbers themselves tell me that what is normal on a 3 to 5 judge system, somewhere between 1.5 and 2 points per run is a normal spread in a 3 to 5 judge system in an aged event finals. That is what it says. So that's what's normal. Now you can begin to have the rest of the conversation. I'll let Jody take it.
No, I think those stats tell you a great deal, and I know you have a lot more of them too. But that tells you something about the spreads. And Shelley and Chelsea and Brian, even at the last time we were in the studio, we were talking about, and earlier too, we were talking about this being a little bit self-serving, only from the people that Shelley, just like you said, well, that judge doesn't know what he's talking about. It's either the owner or the rider. We laugh because from a judge's standpoint, the high guy is always right. Right? I mean, that exhibitor always says, you know what, if that guy one guy marks me a 76 and one marks me a 72, the 6 is always right. They don't pay any attention to the 3 scores that are in the middle, that always the average always tells you this is where you're supposed to be. We kick out the high and the low for a reason, just like the Olympic scoring. But no way. Brian, was the Jeep program going when you were chair of the committee?
Yes.
I can't remember.
Yes, it was just beginning.
Okay. And so anyway, that allows you to go to the judges committee and say, could you review this run for me, please? And doesn't talk about the judges. It's just review the scores for me. Please take a look at it. And it's a good program. But what happens? It's always when someone has a high score and somebody has a low score, that it's always the high guy that they need the rest of them reviewed because the high guy is right. I mean, so it's, the 3 will always tell you where you're supposed to be. I mean, that's of the 5-judge system. It's accurate and works.
Mm-hmm.
I love that story, Jody. And I would love to, maybe this is a whole nother talk for another day, because I would love to, I'm inclined to ask more questions about that program and what you do with that information when you do review it. And I think that's a conversation for another day. What I would love to ask and kind of come back around to is, in talking about, Brian, you said, I'm paraphrasing here, but 62% of runs were within a 2-point spread when looking at this year's, top futurity finalist runs. And your phrase was, which is what our industry is, that's normal. That's normal. You have stats too on the average maximum, right?
Yep, 3.5 points. 3.5 points is the average max. We had one event that had a 5-point spread in it a couple times. So, but again, when you use math, and that's, our system is built on basic math. So the point is, the average maximum spread in an aged event finals is 3.5 points.
Can you tell, and this is a question for both of you guys, when you think about the 2 points to 3.5 points, average maximum, that's an interesting statistic, but I understand, looking across all the events, taking into account the max spreads we saw, that's the average maximum. Got it. That's, again, based on backgate chatter, even a 2-point spread is I have heard some alarmed owners / trainers / moms at a 2-point spread. When they see the difference between a 71 and a 73, a 70.5 to a 71.5. I've heard it. Now a 3.5 point, and I've seen people throw things over a 3-point spread. So can you guys tell me? Let's dive into you say that's normal. Is a 2-point spread? I know statistically it's average. Would you say that that's acceptable?
I would, yes. There's 2 parts to that question. The first is, how many judges in a multiple judge system? Because a 2-judge, a 3-judge, and a 5-judge are our multiple judge systems. And as you go up in volume, the spread, the normal spread, that 1.5 to 2 points with 3 to 5 judges is more normal. it will go down a little bit as you use 2 or 3. And the difference is because what Jody was talking about, why does a 5-judge system work so fundamentally well? Because the high and the low get thrown out and the 3 in the middle get used, and the accuracy to that, we learned 35 years ago, was the best. That still holds true today. What I would tell you though, is that with the depth of competition, it's not splitting it up. So even though it's accurate, but our depth is now getting such that it's getting very bunched because those fine distinctions. The difference between a 218 and 218.5 is a half a point. That's true. But is a half a point enough to split up a 4-way tie? No, it's not. So they're all getting into the same box. So anyways, that's the view to that.
And Jody, I'll pass this over to you. To push even deeper, that 3.5 spread. Is that okay? What do we do with that as an industry?
Well, first of all, I will tell you just from personal experience from monitoring some major events, there are some times that you can have major spreads with non-reviewable penalties. You know, we can review some penalties now. We didn't used to. We have the ability to do that now. Our major penalties, the 2s, the 5s. We had a case a few years ago of a horse that ran out of lead behind, a horse that wasn't a great mover. We had one guy that missed maybe the horse actually going back, looking at it, reviewing it, taking a look at it. The horse jumped out of lead 5 times. That's 5 separate 1-point penalties. We had one guy catch 3 of them. A couple catch 2. One guy maybe caught 1 and missed 4 single 1-points, which there it lies. Somebody's not paying enough attention. You should be able to, but obviously because there were so many, this horse was very difficult to see. So sometimes those big spreads can come from penalty application and not just from maneuver evaluation. The second thing that I will tell you, and you have heard Brian and I mark enough horses side by side to know that we're going to be very close assessing an individual run, but we may get there 2 different directions. People will just say, well, both those guys are right because they were both 74s. Well, you've heard me go, and Brian's going to go, you're going to zero that set of circles. I know you are. I'm +1.5. But we know each other very, very well. And we both may end up with a 74, but maneuver evaluation, we may have 3 different maneuver evaluations on 3 maneuvers. So I would say that maneuver evaluation is where we need the tools to help us separate those horses. It's not just that final score that people look at and say, this is everything. And it's, you know, we're entitled to see different things and we're going to.
And in that too, what I'm understanding is that it's better to look at spreads on a per maneuver basis than it would be to look at a whole run and say the spread between these judges is this.
How did they get there?
That's true. And I want to jump on Jody's thing for 1 second, Chelsea. Because Jody's 100% correct when you talk about penalty application. And the single biggest cause of significant spreads in a multi-judge system is whether a penalty did or did not occur. I would tell you as a sport and an industry, we are beyond the fact of whether that a penalty may or may not occur. In my view, a penalty, which is a rule infraction, it either does happen or it doesn't happen. And in today's time with technology, can we be absolute across the board? Yes, we can. Do we? No. We're only doing it on what we call majors, which is 2 points and above. But using Jody's example of the 5 1-point penalties, our entire system should get them all or none of them. Or if they only saw 2 of them, then they only take 2 of them. But the system should be absolute because those are black and white decisions. And that would keep our emphasis and focal point on the subjective part, which is the individuals that we have the experts for anyways. So I just wanted to jump on that subject because the industry gets confused there. And that penalty app, we have taught ourselves as an industry that penalties sometimes happen or sometimes don't. And I would say that's not true. They either do happen or they don't happen. The responsibility is in the officiating system and they either call it or they don't call it. That's where we should be going.
And we've talked about this on our show times, right? I mean, that's when we have our drag breaks, is when we're going back and reviewing the previous set of runs. And, you know, maybe someone saw it, or someone, meaning one of you, saw it or didn't, or we wanted to see exactly what penalty should be applied. And it's funny, I even found myself sometimes being like, well, what if the horse did this, or what if the horse did that? And I mean, Brian, you look at me and you're like, it doesn't matter. It is what it is.
Correct.
You know, and I think that is really important, that the penalties are black and white. There is no discussion, really.
Right. Correct. And it's the official's responsibility to make the call, but it goes across the system. So anyways, I wanted to make that point of clarification. Then we could be talking about and would it be, is it normal that on maneuver evaluations, you're going to be somewhere in the same category? That answer is yes, because you're then talking about the individual expertise on how good something or how bad something is. The fact that it's correct and it doesn't earn credit and it doesn't have fault should be, that's rare, and it should be a black and white and not a big hard decision. The hard decisions is in quality.
In the bubble, right? Like it's the bubble.
Yep.
So maybe let's take a minute and talk about the bubble. And then I think, Chelsea, we've got some really good interaction from you guys in the audience, and we appreciate that. Please, any questions that are coming out, I know Chelsea's watching it, I've been watching it. We're going to bring those questions up. So as we continue to discuss, throw your questions in there. If you want to keep your questions private, you can shoot a DM to either Chelsea, myself, or ReinerStop. We are watching that as well. We'll definitely keep confidentiality, for anyone. So know that this is a safe zone. This is the tree of trust, guys. But let's talk about that bubble, because I've seen you guys on Showtime when you're like, it's like the head nod and the, because it's like, do we give the half or do we just keep it a 0, you know? And that's, I think, a challenge within our current system right now, in the fact that it's quarters.
And something to, while you guys answer that question, we had a question come in, and to Shelly's point, I've seen earlier questions come in, so we're coming back to yours if you have posted a question already. But along the line of the bubble, this question came in from Becky. When you guys were just talking a minute ago about our system works, it works well, but we don't have enough tools to separate them or do some of the things that we need. In talking maybe about the bubble, can you also, Becky asked, what are some tools we could give our judges or use to help the system?
Jody, you want to take this one first, and then we'll hop over to Brian?
Well, you know, Brian is, first I will ask, you know, Brian, one of the best ideas I've heard in the last 30 years from a judging standpoint came from you. And, you know, we discussed it some when we were talking about the tour, but, you know, Brian had an idea that a couple of the officials should do nothing but do penalty application. And to me, that was, I don't know why it never occurred to me. You watch the National Football League, there's guys in studio across the country making the decisions. The guys are the officials. Here's what happened on camera. Here's what happened. And, you know, for $500,000, we should probably be accurate from a penalty application standpoint. Maneuver evaluation, that's another story. But if it happened for everybody. And Brian, I didn't ask you if it was okay to bring that up and talk about that. But like I said, that was one of the best ideas that I have heard in forever. And it has merit today. It should happen. So anyway, that's number one. I want to blow too much smoke at him, but it was a really, really positive idea. Okay. So I don't know if you girls had ever heard anything about that, but anyway, okay. I digressed a little bit. Shell, what was it? What was the next question? What did you want?
It was the bubble. So talking about like the bubble and how that's challenging, and then what tools judges could use to kind of help eliminate that bubble side of things.
Right. And we have a couple different things. You know, I put forth 10 years ago that we go to a 1 to 10 point system per maneuver, thinking that that's going to make it a little bit easier. It gives us more slots. So instead of saying plus half, minus half, whatever, it's either a 1 to 10 straight. Is that going to be easy? At least let's look at it. Brian, you're more with the Olympic scoring, going to the decimal point system. So I can let him, but for me, if we only have plus half, minus half to work with, if I could assess that maneuver, if 5 were my average, I can go to that tweener. Is it a -0.5 or is it a 0? Well, I can go to a 4, or I could go to a 3, or I can go to a 2. It gives me more spots to evaluate. Brian, with the decimal point system, it makes it very, very clear from the Olympic scoring standpoint, we could do that. What we need on those betweeners is a way to assess them that's more than just the +0.5 or -0.5, the half-point increment. We need quarter points, if you will, or even finer definition than that. So Brian, address that for me.
Thanks. And in 35 years, I think that's the first time Jody's given me a compliment. So
it won't happen again for another 35 years. So don't expect
you gotta take it when
that's
you
it. I saw your smile. I was like, something's coming. I know.
I sat second to Jody half my professional career. So for once I got there. So the point of the story, Jody's correct. Yes. There's two parts, one on penalty application. I've put a lot of research and studying into it. And yes, we should be modifying our multi-judge system to where we have penalty application judges only. That's all they do. And you can have them on both sides of the arena. You can audio visually connect them and they make one decision, and it either happens or doesn't. On the tweener, and Jody and I have talked about this a lot, and we used to spend a lot of time on it. The point is, there are several different options by which you can add it, because, and mine would be different than his. His allows a wider range with a 1 to 10 per maneuver. Mine is actually a little bit simpler. I take us from a fraction to a decimal point. So instead of doing a half, it's 0.5. And I would add a +quarter and -quarter between 0 and a half. But you don't do a 1/4, you do a 0.25. So our system would move from, instead of being a 72.5, a fraction, 72.5. And if we used a quarter, then we would begin to be able to see our numbers go to the second decimal point. And that would begin, you'd be able to have 72.33 and 72.25 and 72.46 and 72.5 and 72.74. You'd be able to start to make, and you wouldn't have to run horses more than their normal competition, but you would begin to see distinctive differences in the depth of competition. So my approach is to take us to a decimal point and add a quarter between 0 and +0.5 and a -quarter between 0 and -0.5. So you'd have a 0 +0.25 +0.5 +0.1 +1.5. That's what I would do in the first step. And if we needed a quarter in between, good and very good, we can add that later. But right now, I would say we don't. Our weakness at the top end of the scale is we do not support the officials to find excellence and mark excellence. That's why we don't see that many 1.5s coming out.
I remember, I don't exactly know what my question is going to be maybe, but Brian, just to talk about this a little bit, but I remember you sharing something with me a little while ago. And I think it was actually around, I think I had asked you a question. I might've sent you score sheets around some run that I watched. And I asked about the spread across a maneuver, right? Maneuver 3 with this judge, maneuver 3 with this judge had a significant spread. Can you explain why that happened? I believe that was the way I asked the question. And you said something back to me like, send me the run. Like, I've got to see the run. I've got to see what that is against what was presented to me. Correct. And that was like a mind-blowing thought for me, because I just thought I was analyzing the scores against each other. And you pointed out that you have to analyze it against what it was. And I think that's interesting to talk about in that same conversation, because it's not, we can use simple statistics like what we're talking about today to talk about a 2-point spread, a 3.5-point spread, a decimal point to create fine distinctions. But then there's also the analysis of what is that against what is presented to you. And now how do you mark excellence, right?
Correct.
Mark what is shown to you.
Correct. But I want to give you something, and Jody's going to be able to speak on this as well. there's a very interesting phenomena that happens within our sport. And the point is, if you sit there and mark a bunch of 72 to 74 runs, mark 20, 30, 40 horses, watch what happens to you the next 71 to 72 run that comes in. That's point one. And the same phenomena will happen when you flip that over. If you mark 40 horses that can't mark over 70, watch what happens to the first horse that walks in that can mark a 72 or better. And the point of both of those are, when you're in the goodness, the good but not as good kind of gets deflated a little bit because it's a relative function. And the same thing's true when you flip it over. If you've been in a batch of competition that is struggling to get to 70, that 71 horse that comes in is going to mark a 2.5.
Looks like a rock star. Yeah.
It's again relative. Well, this goes to the conversation that I've brought up to you guys, and you look at me like the deer in the headlights that I'm out to lunch. But the point is, it's the rest of the environment. Do we put our judges in the position to do their best work at the best part of our competition? No. We actually do the opposite. We have them tired, worn out, hungry.
Like day 10, 100 horses a day.
And then we want them to do great work. And they struggle. Well, okay, well, no duh.
Those are really great points. And we had an anonymous question come in that I think is a perfect one to bring in right here. Thank you for messaging this in. The question is, it seems like when there are judges monitors at the events, the scores tighten up. Can you talk about that a little bit? Jody?
Yeah, I mean, I can address that. And I think whenever I monitor an event, and and we're talking about major events, right? And that's where your monitors are at. So let's talk about the NRHA, the 2 NRHA major events. Let's talk about the Derby and the Futurity. And what happens first of all, let me address Brian's deal a little bit too. And I'll totally agree with him there, because like say, let's have a finals. It doesn't matter if it's NRBC or the Futurity. You'll have the level 1, 2, and 3 finals before you have your level 4 finalists. These guys have already looked at 100 and whatever, 20 plus horses or 10, whatever, before they get to the Futurity. And Brian is absolutely right. They're wore out. There should be 2 separate sets of judges for those finals. I mean, that's what I feel should happen. Okay. So now if we go back and take a look, say at how the best way to say this thing, but let's say, Shall repeat exactly what the question was again? I mean, the anonymous question.
Well, and it came across slightly as a statement, but
okay.
Seems
that
like
helps.
when there are judges monitors at the
Right.
event, the scores tighten up. Can you explain why that happens? Or
for me, from a monitor standpoint, first of all, I would tell my judges that if we're talking about level 4 riders in a Derby that are riding horses from 4 to 7 years old, and my deal is, I would always tell them, look, our job is pretty simple. With the tools that we have to work with, it's to make sure that the correct checks go to the correct people. Okay. I mean, I want the right checks going to the right people. And that means the finalists are right. And I did some research a long time ago and took a look at, let's say, the last horses that made the level 3 finals and failed to make the level 4 finals. And what I found out was, and I go back and use entire committee, we take a look at those runs. And what we found out was that there were probably 2 or 3 horses per major event that were level 3 horses that should have made the level 4 finals. And what would happen is sometimes those level 4 finalists that were squeaked in were third horses from well-known riders that maybe if you compared them back to back, which we don't do, probably those level 3 horses should have gone to the finals. So the correct checks did not go to the correct people. So I was pretty adamant all the time that for me, tight is right, get through the go rounds, make sure you don't have to help these guys. They're very good. They're multi-million-dollar riders. They're riding great horses. You make sure that what they do is correct or good or very good. And I think that's where sometimes that tightness comes in a little bit. So once you get your finalists selected, you go knock yourself out. I mean, you really go for it. But what is important to me, because I've been on both ends of that spectrum in that 4 and that 3 finals, that if I had that low end 3 horse and I was supposed to go to the 4, I wanted to go to the 4. And for me, telling those guys accuracy is way important. Try to keep the guys as fresh as I possibly can, but be accurate. You don't have to step to the plate and help someone through. You've got 3 and 4 days of go rounds, and that's the most difficult thing in the world to go through. You have to make sure that you are as accurate day 2 and day 3 as you were on day 1 to give everybody the same chance. And for me, if I preached at them to say, you know what, if this was your plus half today, it's your plus half tomorrow. So sometimes those exhibitors would say, well, these scores are kind of tight. I don't care as long as the right ones went to the finals.
That's good insight. And a little more came in from our anonymous question to give more context. And they just said, I'm wondering if that's reflective of the judges being safe, right? They're afraid of overmarking them. I think you gave context to that, but I could totally understand where that perspective would come in.
Yeah, and I don't think that the guys that I worked with would be very accurate, and being afraid of marking too much was not the question. I think that sometimes, you know, Brian, and you can attest to this, you've done the same job, you've monitored major events, and sometimes you get a group of horses, just like you talked about, on day 2 and later in the day, and all of a sudden there's 4 or 5 horses that jump in there and mark that 222 or 223, and you might have skewed the scoring system for the day. I mean, guys jump up and you start to get a little bit excited and you're fatigued, or maybe it's towards the end of the day, and you have to take that out. You can't have that happen. And, you know, we've had horses that used to go back on composites that were marking 228s and 229s and the 3-year-olds, and those horses wouldn't be anywhere close to the 222 horses that we have today. So it's perspective, but it's judges' tools and the tools that we have to work with. Judging the futurity go rounds is the hardest. Brian, you've done it. You know what it is to stay accurate through day after day. It's a hard thing to do.
Correct.
I've announced it, and it's a very hard thing to do, and I don't have to make near the amount of decisions that you guys do. So I can't imagine.
My question would be, though, just to kind of build upon what you guys already talked about, and Brian, more on your possible solution to the judging system, kind of adding, making it a decimal system, 0.25, 0.5. Would adding something like that would that make it easier and better for the judges over multiple days of watching 100 head of open horses, like right in the futurity go around? Would that make that not disappear? I mean, there's human element in all of this, but would that minimize it in your guys' opinion?
Yes, I absolutely believe that it would. I think it would make the system and the scale much, much more accurate. I really do.
And then to where you were, gave Brian his first compliment in 35 years of having a separate set of judges for penalties only.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if these are tools, these are things that we can do, and that for the industry, creating more accuracy and more opportunities, getting the right horses and riders into the finals to get the right checks. I mean, I think some of these evolutions to our current system could really help. I mean, Brian, what are your thoughts on kind of everything? You've been so quiet, which is very rare for Brian, you guys. So don't expect this to happen quite often. So Brian, I know you got a lot to say. Share.
I'm still soaking in my first win in 35 years. Jody hit on the single biggest one. And if there's an emphasis, the end goal is to be accurate. That's it. Absolutely true statement. That's what we're all wanting to do. Now your question becomes, how do we make the officiating more accurate? And the assessment and everything, and that's what Chelsea was talking about, because we used to do a lot of this, but you have to start with what the competition shows you. Then you work with what is the officiating system said about that. And then you work on how do you make that more accurate, more consistent, more dependable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then when you have 600 horses in a futurity and it takes 4 days to go through a go round, you actually would be farther ahead because your horses going to the finals is the best batch of horses that the industry has to offer, because you'd really be getting it right. Its accuracy is the end goal. And then there's several different practical options by which we could begin to modernize technology. I'm telling you, back, 15 years ago when Jody and I were on the committee together and doing a lot of work, we were dreaming about, because technology was just starting to come and we couldn't afford it and all that stuff. It's now here. Our ability to use it cost effectively, efficiently, effectively, yes. And so we should be exploring those, but accuracy is the end goal by far.
Love it.
There's a few questions that have come in from a few different people around the same concept. And so I want to pose this to you guys. And I know we are already at, nearing our time, but we want to squeeze in these questions if we can. A few different people have mentioned, in thinking about the reasons that you guys have mentioned, needing to break up our competition, needing to make fine distinctions. Should we think about breaking up the maneuvers, for example, break down the approach, the stop, and the rollback into separate maneuvers? Would that help us?
I lobbied for a long time to make the backup a separate maneuver. My committee didn't think it was important enough. And then if that worked, the rollback a separate maneuver, and perhaps then even go to the lead change. So, but yeah, I think that there are some things, I don't think we need to break a maneuver into 3 or 4 or 5 parts, but I think, like I said, I don't think sometimes a good backup gets enough credit. If a horse comes in and has a 0 stop and he can have a +1.5 backup, he'll get a +0.5. I mean, or maybe get the 0. So I think the only way, unless we can teach a better job, do a better job teaching those judges, that there's some merit to that. I think that could help in some spots. I don't know what Brian thinks, but
I would agree with him. There are spots in our patterns that if we pulled some of that, the lead changes in the circles are one of them. And Jody's 100% correct. The backup is too, because great backups are rare. And when you do see them, your ability to give it significant credit is shadowed by the rest of the maneuver. The lead changes is the other one. And one of our struggles as a sport has always been in the circles, because that lead change will undo a good set of circles faster than lightning, and a great lead change will not give it that much more. So is there an option that you could pull the lead change, because you're talking about 1 to 3 strides? Could you pull those 3 strides out, mark the maneuver by itself, and whether you just deal with whether a penalty does or doesn't occur in a lead change? There's options there. That's the point of that story. And Jody's correct that there are some key spots in our patterns that we could modernize them. Do I think all maneuvers should be broken down? The answer is no.
Well, and if I'm thinking about it from a statistical perspective, although those are, I haven't thought about breaking up the lead change, breaking up the stop. Clearly, that's why you guys are the experts. But from an amount of maneuvers perspective, if you didn't change anything else, you didn't add quarters, you didn't take it to a decimal, you didn't change the mathematical compilation, adding maneuvers wouldn't necessarily, and we haven't necessarily talked about this a lot today, but we've talked about collectively and on Showtime, the fact that and actually, Brian, you've got some statistics on this, so maybe we talk about this next. The results are getting bunched up, right? They're not getting broken up in the results. And by adding a maneuver, in my quick thoughts, that actually wouldn't break them up anymore, right? Because you've still got 5 judges making 5 maneuver calls on that's just going to get added to a total, right? So it might do a better job at being an accurate representation of the run, but it wouldn't necessarily break up where those horses are getting bunched into a set of results, right?
Yes, but that's where, if you picked, it doesn't matter which method. If you took Jody's 1 to 10 scale per maneuver and my add a quarter and go to a decimal point, both of those achieve a similar end, which is making fine distinctions.
Right.
And that we need to do, because the bunch up is happening because the depth of competition is getting deeper and there aren't enough tools to make those distinctions. And yes, that's true. the amount of non-ties is becoming rare.
Can you share some of those stats? And I don't know exactly how you want to position them, but I know that you ran some numbers on where the top of the competition were in the last few things that we've seen in our industry.
Sure. Well, I'll just give you a fast, simple one. At the Silva Futurity at Tulsa, okay, you had 16%, which is 17 runs of the finalists that were not in a tie. That's it. The rest of the horses in the finals ended up in a tie. Now, it's not the same tie. It's just, first place was first. Then you had a tie for second and third. You had a single at fourth, a single at fifth. You had a tie for sixth, seventh, and eighth. You had a tie for 9 through 16th. You had a tie for 17th and 18th. You had a tie for 19th through 22. So you take the top 22 horses at the Silva Futurity, and you got 4 horses that are not in a tie. That's what you got.
What do you guys think about that are on with us right now? I mean, have you guys thought about that? We often, what gets so much light at the top is the top, the winner, right? When there's a tie there, that's what we hear a lot. But down the mix, especially, if the horse show's paying deep and then you have all of these ties, owners, riders, like, what do you guys think about the fact that I think, what did you say, Brian? Four horses were not in a tie?
We're not in a tie. Correct.
That's amazing.
What do you, from an expert perspective, Brian and Jody, I mean, is that really a big deal? Like, it's an interesting statistic, but does it matter?
Let me give you another one. In the run for the million, you had 15 horses in it. You had 3 sets of ties within 15 horses. 3 sets. That's in 15 horses. Those are 15 of the best that we've got. You can interpret that how you want.
How do you interpret that, Jody?
Well, you had a tie for the winner twice.
Right.
I mean, for the run for a million, it's like, how can that be? I mean, how can we not separate 2 horses running at $500,000? I think that we need, those horses need to be separated. But I will say this, with the tools that we have to work with now, I have judged Reinings where, I mean, the first horse that comes in the pen, I mark a 73. And 4 horses later, there is another horse that gets to it in a completely different way. That horse also marks a 73. So here comes my 17th horse that's in there and also marks a 73 in a big open reining. Now, as an exhibitor, do you want me to just separate those because you want to win so badly? I mean, with the tools I have to work with, you just want me to go, okay, well, my first 2 have been marked. I'm going to take this 3rd horse and give it an extra half because I want a winner. I can't do that. I can't. I have to time. Then people will go, 3-way tie for first place. What do you want us to do? It's like, that's not my problem. It's the way you showed your horse. It's the tools that I have to work with. That's where you ended up. We try to not have that happen, but sometimes it does happen. We need to be more accurate, and the way to do that is to give us a couple more tools. And I will go back very quickly and just talk about the additional maneuvers. Chelsea, we'd still have betweeners on those. I mean, if we had an extra backup, Brian might say, well, is it a half or a 0? And I might do the same thing. So, I mean, there's spots to help it, but we need some more tools.
Yep.
Okay, go with your questions.
It's great. I know we're coming up on time, so maybe we do like a speed round for these last few questions. Sure. With some of the ones that have come in from the audience. Shelly, anything you want to tap into before we do kind of a quick fire questions?
Let's, I have one that I kind of want to close up with, actually. So let's get all of our viewer questions out. And then I have a question, because this came up recently, actually at the Best of the West Horse Show. That was just last week. I had a few actual professionals just that I was speaking with. And it's a question that I'm teasing you guys, because I want you guys to stay, because this question is really good. It's a question that as an exhibitor, I always had myself, and I am surprised at the answer, and I know what these guys are going to say because I've talked to them about it at great depth, just because I've had the opportunity to. So with that, let's jump into some of our viewer questions. I know the comments are coming in, and you guys get those in right now. And we're gonna go for it.
Before I ask the questions quickly, if you guys have found value in this video, you've already been in the comment section, so we appreciate that, but please share this video because it will, I think this is great information for our fellow Reiners to have, and we would love to hear their feedback on this as well. So if you found value in this and would be willing, we would appreciate if you share this as well. Quick fire question. Whoever wants to answer it first, answer it. Do you think that at major events, our judges underutilize reviewing opportunities? Do they not review a reviewable penalty when they could?
No.
No.
Okay,
No.
great. How often do you think that the spread score is because of a penalty versus a difference of opinion, a subjective?
Most of the time.
Jody, any addition to that?
I think the percentage is relatively small. I mean, those big spread scores, I mean, I'd say it's hard for me to give a percentage, but I mean, it happens, but most of the time it would be with a penalty 1 on a turn instead of a penalty half, and maybe, you know, a half-point trot coming out of a rollback that someone didn't take. That's it.
Okay, this is a long one for me to rapid fire, but I'm going to try and read it quickly, and you guys can take it. This question came in from Kelly Smith. I would be curious as to, this came in from early in our conversation when we were talking about judging certain maneuvers. I would be curious as to when a person pulls on a horse in the stop versus one who puts their hand down, marking the same score, saying the horses are stopping the same. Why aren't we able to separate those, saying that those who are not drawing on them as much are doing better? Do we like a loose rein in the circles, and will that earn more credit than when we take away credit and use our hand to say whoa rather than our words?
Well, I can start, Brian, you can add to it. Absolutely. It's kind of like the two-handed to one-handed, young futurity horses that we see. Very, very difficult to judge a horse with two hands as opposed to one hand. I mean, the one hand has to get more credit because he's more willingly guided. He's not using, that rider's not using inside bridle rein. So yeah, Kelly, to answer your question, for me, as long as the horse does what it's told, in other words, if you have 2 foot of slack and the thing runs off across the middle, you're not going to get any credit for that, right? But if you have your hand in the middle of that thing's neck and it's doing what it's told, yes, you're going to get more credit.
I would 100% agree, and the answer is degree of difficulty. So when it works, it's more difficult, would earn more credit. That is the answer.
Okay, and last question. At what point in the season do you switch to a felt hat?
Right after Labor Day.
Yeah, and I will tell you this, Chelsea, it's kind of like I tell Amy all the time, it doesn't matter what color your saddle pad is or if you have your mane banded. To me, it's what you do in the ring. Okay, so I want you to look really good and wear a felt hat, but if you have a straw hat on and your horse marks a 74, it's still going to mark a 74.
Says the guy who texted us before our last stream saying felt or straw.
Yeah. Hey, we like I said, the guy's got it. The guy's got to be on the same page.
That's right. That's
Hey,
right.
Be proud. Be proud. That's awesome.
I love it. Before we wrap up with our last question, may I just first of all thank all of our viewers from my heart to yours. We appreciate you guys being on and we appreciate your questions. Also, a reminder that our Congress coverage, Showtime coverage, ReinerStop Showtime, is still available. So you can go to ReinerStop.com. And while today's talk and our ReinerStop TV in general is talking about general topics in the industry so that we can banter and dive into some of those, Showtime is all about analyzing the competition, analyzing what's happening in our industry and learning from real life competition. So I would love, if you have not yet viewed that, to go to ReinerStop.com and grab viewership of that. It will be live through Monday. Shelly, take it away.
Awesome. Chelsea, I couldn't agree more. You guys, thank you for joining us here on ReinerStop TV. Showtime is a lot of fun as well, but I love these and I love the live feel of them, and all of you guys viewing and your comments and questions in are awesome. And if you guys have any topics that you want to talk about, shoot us messages, whatever. We have incorporated a lot of those. So with my last question, and like I said, this is very relevant. This just came up and I know that I've talked about it with both of you guys. But when judges when you guys are sitting in the chair and someone comes walking in the pen, are you looking to take credit or give credit?
I'm looking to give it.
Absolutely.
So that's something that I've heard pretty consistently. And you guys let us know in the comments. Actually, I'd love to know your thoughts, but I heard this firsthand, actually from a handful of professionals at the horse show recently, is just kind of the feeling sometimes as you go in there is that the judges are trying to take credit away. And I know that I've had that feeling before as well. But after talking to these two gentlemen and understanding the tools that they have right now at their disposal, they're absolutely there to give credit. So I just wanted you guys to hear that from two highly respected, highly experienced, you remember 1985 judges, these
Old.
right? Old, gray hair,
Yeah.
all that good stuff. They're there and they want to give credit. And I think that is so important for our industry to know that they want to find the right winner. They want to put that winner there. Right? So I just wanted you guys to hear that. I hope you guys have a wonderful night. Thank you, Brian and Jody, for joining us again. And
Thank you.
we'll do it soon.
Yes, many thanks. We had some great viewers on. Australia is commenting in right now. Thank you for joining. New York, Michigan, Texas, another Australia. Hey, Australia, Indiana, Pennsylvania, really New York. So thank you guys for tuning in. Let us know if you have topics that you would like to hear from us on as we book out the rest of the year. We are rounding out 2021 already. Futurity coming up soon. We'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.
Bye.